lying. Jake Roberts has been using his ring name as his real name for nearly 40 years, clearly not wanting to have his father's name attached to him. Grizzly Smith died in 2010 from Alzheimer's disease. While I honestly don't think anyone deserves to suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia, I really do have a hard time feeling sorry for a man who spent so many years abusing his own children and many more years abusing other people's children and possibly murdered his own daughter. As I said, nobody ever talks about Grizzly Smith in regards to his career anymore. These days, the only time people talk about Grizzly Smith is to discuss what a truly sick and disgusting monster he was.
Hey my wrestling friends, welcome to Figure 4 TV. Now today we fitting to talk about the worst dad in professional wrestling history. Now we know his son, Jake the Snake, and we know his daughter, Rockin Robin. But what do you know about the father, Grizzly Smith, guys? We're gonna get into it today. So without any further ado, let's react to this video.
Aurelian Smith was a professional wrestler from Whitesboro, Texas, born in 1932. Originally an oil worker, he took up wrestling in 1958, adopting the name Grizzly Smith, no doubt inspired by his large 6'10" frame and hair-covered torso. He was yet another wrestler on this list who never really saw much success, despite having a long career. The highest profile match he had was against the legendary Classy Freddie Blassie for the NWA Georgia World Heavyweight Championship, but he lost the match. His wrestling career isn't worth talking about, as nobody really remembers him for his in-ring work. These days, Grizzly Smith is more infamous for his life outside of wrestling. To put it simply, this man was a monster. He fathered his first child in 1955 at the age of 23. At the time of the child's conception, he was dating a single mother who had a 13-year-old daughter named Paula. However, the woman Grizzly was dating was not the mother of his first child. He had f***ed himself on Paula, leading to her becoming pregnant with his son, Aurelian Smith Jr.
My father was a pedophile. Disgusting pedophile. Which would haunt me the rest of my life.
And a lot of us think we got problems. Can you imagine that? Your mother is your father's stepdaughter? That's crazy, right? Your mother is your father's stepdaughter. And we think we got problems. We walk around here with our head down. And guys, it's not the end of the world. Don't beat yourself up. People have problems. Other people have real issues and real problems. All right? So you don't ever take your life for granted. Don't ever take what you have for granted, guys. People have less, some people have more. But now we understand why Jake the Snake suffered with the alcoholism. Now we see why Jake the Snake had to go link up with DDP. Because this is something that no child should have to bear. Let's continue.
He and Paula were forced to marry, and over the next several years, they had 2 more children before Grizzly left Paula when she was 17, at which point she abandoned her children, and the 3 of them were passed around to different homes. After leaving Paula, Grizzly remarried to a woman named Marcia, who was only 16 when the two married, with his eldest son, Aurelian Jr., coming back to live with them after the death of his grandmother. Marcia would abuse Jr. and would beat him whenever he tried to tell his father. Grizzly was actually completely aware of what was happening, as he was doing the same thing to his daughters. It apparently all started with his daughter Robin when she was 8 years old. This went on for 6 years before Robin eventually told her mother, at which point they left. A year later, Robin warned her father that if he ever tried anything again, she would shoot him with his own gun.
Alright guys, before we get into the interview with Rockin Robin from the Hotspot Wrestling Network TV channel, what I want y'all to know, this lady was not just any old pushover. She had a great feud with Sensational Sherry. She won the Women's World title from Sensational Sherry over in France, and she had a great feud. So before we get to the interview, let me freshen y'all thoughts on who this woman really is with a promo when she was in a feud with Sherry. All right, let's get it, guys.
Jerry, you better come after me with everything you've got, because I'm not about to give up my dream now.
You were molested as a child,
Right.
with your father, Grizzly Smith. When did that start?
What I remember was probably around 6, 7 years old. People that have that problem, the whole thing is, that it's about young children, young kids. And as a child, though, as a child, you feel a tremendous amount of guilt. Like, what did I do to bring that on? Why am I different?
Oh, you're seeing this big 7-foot man. He's bigger than life. Not only is he your father, but he's a bigger than life figure.
And it wasn't just me. I think it's something that's deeply embedded with any child molester. There's just something really off there. You want nothing more than for it to stop, but the only way to do that is to destroy the person who's doing that. And when that's your father, you don't want to see him destroyed. It's talked about nowadays, so much more. We're talking 30 some odd years ago when it wasn't talked about. Finally, my mother had a suspicion about it, and she sat me down and she asked me, is there anything you want to tell me? He ruined enough of my life. He ruined my childhood. I certainly wasn't going to let him ruin the rest of my life. My experience with my father was completely different from Sam and Jake and Richard. Mm-hmm. And where I think they truly looked up to him, idolized him, but they didn't go through the same things that I did. Now, Jocelyn? And I don't mean Jolene.
Jolene, I'm sorry.
Yeah. See, that's one of those things that about 2 weeks before she went missing, about 2 weeks before she was kidnapped, she came and picked me up. I hadn't seen her in quite a few years. And I could tell there was something that she wanted to talk to me about. And I think that she wanted to have that conversation.
In 1978, Grizzly's older daughter Jolene was kidnapped and murdered, with her husband's ex-wife being the prime suspect in the case. While the ex-wife did confess to the kidnapping, she said that she was not the one who murdered Jolene, as she had escaped. Years later, Grizzly's family said that they believed he may have been the real culprit behind Jolene's death, as he had, quote, the most to lose, because Jolene not only suffered at his hands, but was also aware of him most likely abusing other young girls who he'd take out on the road with him. He also stopped his son Richard from taking the case to the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, with the only reason he could possibly have for stopping them from covering the story being that he didn't want the mystery to be solved. Grizzly continued his deplorable behavior towards young girls into the 80s, with Robin saying that the last time it happened, he had shown up at her home with a 9-year-old girl and spent the night there. Robin stayed awake the whole night talking to the girl. The next morning, she forced him to leave and wouldn't allow him to take the girl with him.
He got up the next morning, got all his things together and said, come on, we gotta go. And I said, you're gonna go, but she's not going anywhere. She's staying right here. I was not letting this girl go anywhere. I think that told him everything he needed to know about how I felt.
3 of Grizzly's children would also become wrestlers. Robin would become known as Rockin Robin and would see some success in the WWE, winning the promotion's Women's Championship. Michael Smith would become known as Sam Houston. He seemed to be Grizzly's favorite son, as Michael is said to have idolized him, and most likely would have sided with his father if he had known about the abuse his siblings suffered at his hands. His career was not successful due to his many run-ins with the law related to drink driving, which eventually saw him sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2005. Grizzly's eldest son, Aurelian Jr., was the first of his children to take up wrestling. He chose to become a wrestler out of hatred for his father, who would constantly tell him that he was a failure and never amount to anything. Jr. wanted to overshadow his father, not just to spite him, but also so he'd be proud of him.
He didn't want me in wrestling, period. In fact, he got me fired a couple places, asked the promoters to fire me. Father looked at me and said, I'm ashamed of you, you're gutless, and you'll never amount to anything. That was my whole drive. I got into wrestling because I hated my father. And I was going to break it off in his ass. I wanted to hear my father say, I'm proud of you, son.
Aurelian Jr., of course, would become known exclusively as Jake the Snake Roberts, one of the most famous wrestlers of the 1980s and a WWE Hall of Fame inductee. Grizzly Smith would become all but forgotten. It wasn't until the 1999 documentary Beyond the Mat where he would finally appear on screen again, although his appearance follows a scene in which Jake Roberts details the story behind his conception and what kind of a man his father was.
My mother was 13 years old when I was born. Why? Because my dad, the little girl that was in a room asleep. My dad was going out with my mother's mother. There you go. There's some bones for Jake the Snake.
When he's being interviewed, Grizzly actually had the nerve to say that he loved Jake and that he was born out of love.
He's got a lot of good qualities, and he was born out of love, and I still love him.
He knows his opponent is completely helpless to resist the submission hold. He's in full-on attack mode now. There's what?
But considering Jake has said that Grizzly never apologized for anything he put his children through, he was obviously lying. Jake Roberts has been using his ring name as his real name for nearly 40 years, clearly not wanting to have his father's name attached to him. Grizzly Smith died in 2010 from Alzheimer's disease. While I honestly don't think anyone deserves to suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia, I really do have a hard time feeling sorry for a man who spent so many years abusing his own children and many more years abusing other people's children and possibly murdered his own daughter. As I said, nobody ever talks about Grizzly Smith in regards to his career anymore. These days, the only time people talk about Grizzly Smith is to discuss what a truly sick and disgusting monster he was.
Different in that respect, because it was so obvious. You know, Grizzly walk into a building and walk in not hand in hand, but side by side with two, 12, 13-year-old little girls.
Oh, God.
And of course, the boys are not going to say anything because he's booking and doing the payoffs. And then to give the report back to Leroy, he was, allegedly Leroy's eyes and ears. I don't know how much he told Leroy. He didn't tell him the whole truth. He couldn't tell him the whole truth.
Right.
And now wrestling fans, the worst dad in professional wrestling history belongs to Jake the Snake and Rockin Robin. Incredible, y'all. If you like the video, hit the like button. And if you really like old school wrestling or just wrestling content in general, you might as well hit the subscribe button, because we bringing the news, we delivering the content over here at the Figure 4 TV. Also, guys, don't forget to check out our mother channels, Red Carpet Ring, Toxic Ring Scandals, and we also got a new channel called the Pink Square Circle. So you guys, knock yourself out. Enjoy the wrestling content. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan. Salute, y'all.
This is a wreck. He's moving like an uncaged animal. No lie, he's wild in there.